I knew he was going to steal it the moment he smiled. That fake plastic grin, wide enough to show teeth, tight enough to hide intent, appeared the second Eric Shaw saw my prototype run for the first time. The display flickered, stabilized, and in under 7 seconds, the predictive algorithm mapped an entire logistics chain without a single bottleneck. It wasn't just working, it was perfect. I should have been ecstatic. Instead, I watched my boss's expression change from admiration to calculation. "That's impressive," he said, voice stretched thin like rubber. "You're telling me this thing can cut operational lag by, 40%? 43, I corrected, still catching my breath. If scaled, maybe more. He nodded slowly, eyes darting across the screen, then at me. "Good work, Alex. Really. This could put us on the board's radar." Us. The word stuck in my throat. The entire concept, code, architecture, even the interface, was mine. Months of sleepless nights and bad coffee, hidden behind maintenance reports so management wouldn't notice what I was building. But Derek wasn't interested in my work. He was interested in what it could do for him. He clapped my shoulder. "I'll need your raw files before Friday. The execs are meeting, and I want to give them a preview." I hesitated. "You want me there, right?" He laughed, small, dismissive. "You know how these things go. I'll handle the presentation. You'd just get buried in the technical weeds." Then, softer, "Don't worry. I'll make sure they know who did the heavy lifting." He didn't look at me when he said it. He was already texting someone. That night, I stayed in the lab long after the motion lights shut off. The hum of the servers felt louder in the dark, almost judgmental. I backed up everything, design notes, timestamps, prototype logs, onto an encrypted drive labeled Eve.01, short for Evolution Engine. It wasn't company property, not really. I'd written every line on my own laptop, off the clock. I just didn't know I'd need to prove it. The next morning, the prototype disappeared from my desk. No note, no explanation, just gone. Derek didn't even look surprised when I confronted him. "Oh, I took it to HQ early," he said, sipping his coffee like he hadn't just broken every R&D protocol. "Relax, Alex. You'll get your credit." He smiled again, the same smile from the night before. That's when I started keeping a folder on him. Emails, edits, voice memos, proof. Not because I planned revenge then, but because I've learned that in corporate life, the truth needs receipts. I didn't know it yet, but that folder was the first move in a much larger game, one he thought he was winning. I didn't get a seat at the table. I got a calendar invite marked optional, with the location set to Executive Conference, capacity reached. Through the glass wall I could see them anyway. Polished shoes, colder smiles, a pastry tower no one would touch. Derek stood at the head of the room, sleeves rolled, the practiced posture of a man who confuses confidence with custody. Slide 1 flashed, a sleek logo I had never approved. Aurora Engine. Not Eve, not mine. Below the title, a single line. Presented by Derek Shaw, VP Product Strategy. My name had been where that line lived all quarter. On the roadmap, on the internal wiki, on the commit history. Now it was an absence wearing cologne. He started with a joke about traffic. Laughter. Then he dropped our latency numbers like a magician producing doves from an empty hat. 43% reduction, predictive routing, dynamic rebalancing under load. Every phrase I'd coined on sleepless nights came out of his mouth like he'd chewed them for flavor. I watched the slides turn into a crime scene. My whiteboard sketches, recreated and cleaned. My interface, recolored and cropped. Even the demo route I used at 2 a.m., the same dataset, the same sequence, only now the tooltip with my initials in the corner had been scrubbed. Where there should have been AB test 042, there was nothing. Clean. Sterile. Stolen. Of course, Derek said, palms open in counterfeit humility. This was a team effort. He listed names like Garnish. Mine didn't appear. I felt the heat rise behind my ears, that dizzying mix of fury and awe you get when you realize the con is bigger than your outrage. He wasn't improvising. He was executing. Applause. The CFO leaned forward the way people do when they smell money. A board member asked about scalability. Derek clicked to my stress chart and said, "We can get there by Q3 with modest hiring." Modest. I'd written that note to myself back when modest meant one distributed systems engineer and a pizza budget. When the meeting broke, Derek stepped into the hallway and spotted me, surprise arranged on his face like furniture. "Alex, didn't see you there." He lowered his voice. "Good instincts staying out. This crowd idolizes outcomes, not architecture." "Where's my byline?" I asked. My mouth was dry. The words still landed sharp. He chuckled. "Don't take it personally. You're not presentation material. I'll take care of you when this ships." Then the squeeze on my shoulder, the counterfeit blessing, the warning disguised as warmth. "Send me your raw models and the training notes tonight. We've got press." He moved on before I could answer, already rehearsing angles for interviews that hadn't been offered yet. Behind the glass, the CFO shook his hand like sealing a treaty. I walked back to my desk on legs that didn't feel like mine. The lab smelled like dust and lemon cleaner. I opened the folder I'd started, receipts, and dragged in new files, screenshots of the deck, the time-stamped invites, the diff where my initials vanished from the prototype credits. Then I opened my notebook and wrote a single line across the page. "He thinks the room is his. Make the room a record." I didn't plan a speech. I planned an archive. He'd taken the stage. I'd take the timeline. And timelines, unlike men, don't forget who spoke first. I came in early the next Monday, hoping that silence might steady me. Instead, I found an envelope on my keyboard with the company letterhead and that sterile phrase that ends careers, notice of termination. No warning, no HR meeting, just a signature at the bottom that read Derek Shaw. I stared at it long enough for the office lights to flicker on around me. My badge still worked when I swiped it, but I already knew the access would die by noon. He arrived late, latte in hand, the smell of burnt caramel filling the hall. "Alex, good you're here," he said, as if this was routine. "You've done incredible work, but corporate restructuring, you know how it goes. Budgets, realignment, nothing personal." I didn't answer. I just held up the paper. He sighed theatrically. "Look, between us, you'll land on your feet. You're talented, just not strategic. The board needs visionaries right now." "Visionaries who steal prototypes?" I said quietly. His eyes narrowed. "Careful, Alex. Words like that can burn bridges. You don't want to look bitter. People notice tone more than truth." It was the kind of sentence that only sounds wise to the person saying it. I packed my things slowly. Laptop charger, coffee mug, the small screwdriver set I used to rebuild circuit boards. My hands shook, not from sadness, but from restraint. Every instinct screamed to shout, to expose him right there. But noise fades fast in corporate halls. Paperwork endures. When I reached the elevator, I noticed my reflection. Tie loosened, eyes hollow, but something new flickering behind them. Not grief. Strategy. HR finally called me in, an apology hidden inside a script. "You're receiving 8 weeks severance," the rep said, glancing at Derek through the glass. "We'll, need your company device and ID." I slid them across the table. Of course. She leaned closer, voice lowering. "For what it's worth, everyone knows it was your project." "Knowing isn't the same as proving," I said, and her silence agreed. Outside, the sky was bruised purple, the kind of late-afternoon light that makes metal glow. I sat in my car, envelope in hand, and replayed his voice. "You'll land on your feet." Maybe he was right, just not in the way he imagined. That night I opened the folder named Receipts and started organizing everything. Emails, commit logs, presentation timestamps, the whole digital skeleton of his theft. Each file went into a new directory labeled Countermove. Then I drafted a single line at the top of a blank document. If he thinks he owns the invention, let the law remind him who built it. When I hit save, the file name read simply patent_draft01.pdf. And for the first time since that stolen meeting, I smiled. The post office was nearly empty that morning, just the low hum of fluorescent lights and the sharp scent of paper dust. I stood at the counter, pen in hand, staring at the envelope as though it might breathe. Inside it lay months of sleepless nights, lines of code, design sketches, and the digital receipts that proved every bite of the Aurora engine began in my apartment, not Derek Shaw's boardroom. The clerk looked up. "Certified or registered?" "Registered," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Destination? U.S. Patent and Trademark Office." He stamped it, slid it across the scale, and said, "Tracking numbers on your receipt." As the envelope disappeared behind the counter slot, something inside me went silent, like a switch flipped from fury to focus. Revenge wasn't the goal anymore. Ownership was. I drove home with the windows cracked, the cold air sharp enough to keep me awake. My apartment was small, but honest. No glass walls, no fake smiles. I made coffee and opened my laptop. The document I'd sent off, patent_draft01, sat in the folder beside every note and email I'd ever written. Each file was a breadcrumb leading back to me. That afternoon, I sent a single email to myself, time-stamped and encrypted. Subject: Eve.01, Original Architecture. Attached: Logs, Codebase History, Private Dev Environment Capture. It wasn't paranoia. It was insurance. Over the next few days, I built a timeline, one that no PR spin could erase. Screenshots of commits at 3 a.m., Slack messages showing Derek's updates hours after my uploads. Even metadata from prototype photos with my reflection ghosting faintly in the screen. The record didn't lie. But something else happened in that quiet. The fear drained out. For months, I'd lived under someone else's definition of value. Presentation ready, socially smooth, market-facing. Now it was just me and the work, unfiltered. I realized how small Derek's world really was. He needed applause to exist. I just needed proof. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived. Plain envelope, government seal. "We have received your submission and are processing your application for patent review." My hands trembled as I read it, not from nerves, from relief. The first move was done. The clock was ticking now, not for me, but for him. That evening, I walked past company headquarters. Through the glass, I saw Derek giving a tour, pointing at my old workspace like it was an exhibit. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. My signature was already traveling through the federal system, each mile bringing it closer to validation. By the time he found out, it would be too late. I turned away from the building, the city lights bending on the wet pavement, and whispered to no one in particular, checkmate doesn't start with the final move. It starts the moment your opponent forgets you're still playing. 6 months passed. Long enough for the world to forget me, but not long enough for Derek Shaw to stop talking. Every few weeks, a headline popped up in my newsfeed. Aurora engine set to revolutionize supply chains, or Derek Shaw leads innovation division into new era. His grin was everywhere. Conference panels, tech journals, glossy LinkedIn posts written by his PR team. I stopped opening the articles after a while. They all said the same thing. None of them said my name. Then came the email that made my pulse stop for a second. Aurora product launch. You're invited. A generic company blast sent to every former employee still lurking in the mailing list. I should have deleted it. Instead, I clicked Attend virtually. The day of the launch, I brewed coffee like I was preparing for battle. The live stream window opened to a stage bathed in blue light, a giant LED display looping my stolen interface, still mine down to the smallest animation delay. Derek stepped onto the stage in his tailored suit, waving to applause that wasn't his to claim. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice smooth as glass, "today we unveil a system years in the making, a product that will change logistics as we know it." Years in the making. Funny, since 6 months ago he couldn't define half the acronyms on my whiteboard. I watched from my apartment, hands steady on the keyboard. The letter from the U.S. Patent Office sat beside me, framed under the glow of the desk lamp. Application approved. Patent pending under name Alexander Brooks. Invention, evolutionary predictive routing algorithm, Eve.01. Every line of Aurora's code was built on that architecture. Every demo he showed carried my digital fingerprint. He launched into his presentation, oblivious to the fact that the same server running his live demo contained an open port I'd set up long before leaving, a logging script that silently tagged every execution instance with a checksum traceable to my patent application. Proof, alive and undeniable. When the demo concluded, the room erupted in applause. Derek smiled, soaking it in, hands raised like a preacher at the altar of innovation. "Welcome," he said, "to the future of logistics." I almost laughed. He didn't realize the future was already in motion, and it didn't belong to him. After the stream ended, I composed an email. To Corporate Legal Department, CC, U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Subject, unauthorized use of protected invention, patent ref number EVE01-2025. Attached, ownership documentation, code comparisons, checksum logs, and public launch footage. I hovered over the send button for a long breath, then clicked. The message disappeared into the void. Quiet, official, irreversible. Outside, the city pulsed with light. Somewhere downtown, Derek was probably at a bar, clinking glasses to his victory. But I knew what was coming. The letter, the call, the realization that the invention he'd built his future on had never been his to begin with. Revenge didn't feel loud. It felt surgical. 3 days after the launch, I woke to the vibration of my phone on the nightstand. 4 missed calls from an unknown DC number and 1 unread email from legal@aurorotech.com. I didn't open it right away. I made coffee first. A small act of defiance, maybe. Or composure. When I finally clicked, the subject line stared back. Urgent. Intellectual property inquiry. The body was short, clipped, corporate. Mr. Brooks, We've been contacted by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office regarding your recent filing. Could we schedule a discussion to clarify certain ownership matters? Ownership matters. The phrase made me smile. By noon, the story had moved faster than gossip. My attorney confirmed the letter had reached their office at 9:17 a.m. sharp, a formal cease and desist citing patent infringement under federal code. The clock had started ticking, and Aurora's lawyers knew it. Meanwhile, I streamed Derek's post-launch interview on the business channel. His smile looked tighter now, like a suit a size too small. The host asked about allegations of impropriety regarding the algorithm's origins. His answer was a masterpiece of panic wrapped in polish. Every innovation at Aurora is the result of teamwork, he said, blinking too often. No single person can claim sole ownership. Except someone already had. Legally. That evening, a courier arrived at my door with a thick envelope stamped confidential. Inside was their counteroffer, an NDA, a settlement clause, and a polite request to transfer applicable rights for mutual benefit. Translation: take the money and vanish. I poured myself a drink instead and reread the patent letter framed on my wall. The paper felt heavier now, as if the ink itself understood what it had become. Leverage. My attorney drafted the reply. Our client declines settlement. He welcomes formal arbitration. Please note that continued use of the disputed technology constitutes ongoing violation. We sent it certified. Paper against empire. By the next morning, the company's website quietly removed all mentions of Aurora Engine. The social media accounts stopped posting. Journalists began asking questions that no PR statement could neutralize. A source from inside whispered that Derek had called an emergency meeting with the board, closed doors, raised voices. I imagined him pacing the glass conference room, the same one where he'd stolen my presentation months ago. Only now, every reflection in that glass was a reminder of the ghost he thought he'd erased. Late that night, an alert pinged on my patent tracker. Case status: active investigation. Compliance review initiated. I leaned back, the city lights painting fractured patterns across my ceiling. He'd wanted to own the future. Instead, he'd just received official notice that the future already had an owner. By the time the story broke, I didn't even have to say a word. The truth had momentum. It started with a tech journalist from the Chronicle who'd been digging through patent filings. She called me one afternoon, voice calm but electric. Mr. Brooks, is it true you filed the Eve-01 algorithm 6 months before Aurora's Aurora Engine launch? I can't comment, I said carefully. But the silence that followed was answer enough. The article dropped 2 days later. Innovation or infringement? Aurora Tech under fire for stolen IP. The piece went viral in less than an hour. Screenshots of my original schematics floated beside photos of Derek shaking hands with investors. The checksum traces, the matching UI layouts, every digital fingerprint I'd documented were laid out in bullet points so clear even non-engineers could follow. By noon, the company's stock started to slide. By evening, the slide turned into a freefall. Inside Aurora, panic spread faster than any algorithm. My inbox filled with messages from former coworkers, some apologizing, others quietly celebrating. One from Maya, a data analyst I'd mentored, simply said, "He's in the boardroom. They locked the doors. No one's defending him." I didn't need details to picture it. Derek pacing, jaw tight, PR head sweating through his suit, legal trying to spin a narrative where theft somehow looked like leadership. But there's no branding strong enough to overwrite federal records. That night, I got a call from a blocked number. I let it ring twice before answering. "Alex." His voice, flat now, stripped of charm. We need to talk. I think we already did, I said. You don't understand what you've started. The company's collapsing. Everyone loses here. Not everyone, I replied. Just the thief. He exhaled hard through the line, a sound somewhere between anger and regret. You could have come to me. I did, I said softly. You called it whining. Silence. Then the click of defeat. The next morning, headlines confirmed what I already knew. Derek Shaw, suspended pending investigation. The board issued a statement about a leadership transition to restore integrity. Investors demanded restitution. Aurora's offices went dark by the end of the week. Meanwhile, I met with my attorney in a cafe downtown. He slid a folder across the table. Press inquiries, licensing proposals, even an invitation from a venture firm wanting to back Eve Technologies, my newly formed startup. You've won, he said. I stirred my coffee, watching the swirl fade. No, I murmured. I've corrected the record. As we stepped outside, the evening light hit the city glass just right, each window flashing like a mirror. For the first time in months, I saw my reflection without the weight of someone else's shadow over it. The story was everywhere, but it didn't feel like noise. It felt like closure. 6 months after Derek's fall, the office that once belonged to Aurora's innovation division had a new nameplate on the frosted glass. Eve Technologies. Same building, different air. When I walked in each morning, the hum of servers and the chatter of engineers didn't sound like pressure anymore. They sounded like possibility. Half my team were former Aurora employees who'd left after the scandal, people who'd seen what silence costs. Now they worked freely, their names printed on every project file, every design draft. Credit wasn't a privilege here, it was policy. We built faster than I expected. The same algorithm Derek tried to claim was now refined, modular, and legally unshakable under my name. Investors called it the most ethical turnaround in tech history. I just called it balance. One rainy evening, I received an anonymous package at reception. Inside was a slim manila envelope containing a short note. He took a plea: corporate misconduct, falsified filings, 6 months probation, no executive positions for life. A friend in legal. I didn't feel triumph, just a kind of quiet symmetry. The game had ended exactly where it began, with paperwork. That night I stayed late in the lab. The city below looked like a circuit board, lights blinking in grids, power flowing through invisible lines. I ran my fingers along the edge of the patent certificate framed on the wall. My name, my signature. Proof that I'd been here, that ideas born in silence can outlast the noise that steals them. Maya stopped by my door before leaving. Press wants a quote for the documentary, she said. They're calling it The Man Who Owned His Future. I smiled. Tell them I didn't own it. I just stopped giving it away. After she left, I sat at my desk, opened a new document, and typed the first line of our next project proposal. It felt like starting over, but lighter. No ghosts in the glass walls this time. Outside, thunder rolled over the skyline. Somewhere, Derek Shaw was probably watching the same storm, wondering how it all slipped through his hands. But storms don't choose sides. They just clear the air for what comes next. I leaned back, closed my laptop, and whispered to the empty room. He wanted fame. I wanted fairness. Turns out, fairness lasts longer. The servers hummed their quiet applause. and for the first time in years I felt exactly where I was meant to be. Not ahead of the game, not behind it, but finally playing my own.